fancy intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
Welcome back, Star Trek Fleet Command fans. Do want to apologize for how tardy this video is coming out today. Just a lot going on with real life, and our city shuts down when it gets really cold. So, real quick, I want to go over a couple different things. One, I want to go over what is the most valuable thing to go after in the DTI Faction store. Yes, these can be quite difficult for some players, and I did put out a video recently going over the best strategies for taking on the new Krenom, non-modas. And I agree with players who have, vented about the frustrations of, why are we doing armadas that aren't armadas? Because really all that ends up doing is negates the officers that we've used for years. I think that's a very legitimate complaint, and I've passed those type of notes along. But I do want to go over all the things like this. What all is inside? What should you go after? What favors are most valuable early on? And in fact, before we get into that, there's actually something I want to give you a heads up on. If you're watching this video the day that it comes out, there is a new code that you can put in, DTI Max. Now, what this code is going to do is allow you to experience what the building does in terms of bonus-wise. That's important because remember, there's a big Krenom bonus in the building, as well as giving you more directives to run these as players take more time to figure out what crews work for them, etc. Remember, the big key is getting the exocomps active, using those exocomps that you can see at the top up there, the charged and the static, and make sure you're applying them to the correct armadas. We've also passed on feedback that the visibility and understanding of that is not exactly intuitive for many people, but put in that new code to get new data points, and there you go. So let's talk about what is worth going after. And I think, to me, some of the early things are pretty obvious. And when I say obvious, I'm talking about loot. So a lot of the people who watch my content tend to be either free to play or light spinners. No offense to our higher level players out there. And I definitely pass along the feedback that the VIPs have passed on with this. And they're not super happy about it. But let's talk about what you can go after to make this better for you. Well, number one, I think the most important thing to go after, similar to how we talked about in the Borg faction, just had to go after, the charge so that you could, delay that beam. You wanted that beam delay. Well, here you really want that temporal material scanning first of all, meaning that you're going to need the static particles to go after that. This is going to increase the amount that the payouts provide for each one of those types. So this was going to increase the static and charge temporal wreckage. Remember, you need that temporal wreckage to do these turn-ins up here so that you can get credits and then spend those credits on things like faction credits. You can do it on Syndicate XP. You can do it on the reputation needed to increase your rep. And then you're going to start seeing things that pop up here like an agent, where you can go after more Borg credits and more uncommons, and even eventually going after artifacts, things like that. Now, all those are important. And real quick, let me cover which ones I think are valuable. Keep in mind, favors first. But real quick, just to cover it, I think for players that do not have Hue yet, this is a good one. But you will need a special type, a particle. So keep that in mind. I think Hue is good. However, I think not everybody is as good. I think the Borg can be useful. Remember, there's rare and epic, there's uncommon, depends on what you need. The security card, you're going to need, again, you can see the code that we're particularly going for here. We're going to need that to upgrade our building. The Krenom time charge, that's a one-time. Coming on down, there is a conversion rate. I do want to point out there is a tax. I got a video about taxes coming up here quite soon. Not the American taxes, the in-game taxes. And for those curious, right over here, here is your exchange rate. Let me scroll it on down, actually. Your exchange rate right there. Yeah, taxes. I guess I understand to an extent. I wish it was a 0.8 ratio for the material conversion, but that's not the case. But important to know these numbers, and keep in mind, for those curious at what ops level the requirements are for your turn-ins, that is what is right above. Let's hop back over to the sheets itself, though. I do think that going after Torah right here is incredibly important. And again, you can see the static symbol right there, as well as Janeway's pocket watch, which is going to take charge. And it's wanting you to go after both of these things. And truthfully, there are nice things here. But for players, the main thing I'm wanting y'all to focus on, number one, is going after the loot bonus that you're going to get from the material scanning. And then after that, there are a couple other things I kind of want you to focus on. Now, I do want you to bear in mind there are some good things here. For example, I like the reverence favors. These are something to consider probably a little bit later on, because after you go after those by turning in this, and you can see that takes that premium material. So we might want to save on that for a bit. But at the same time, immediately you're going to have access to things like the quantum state disruption, the quantum charge disruption, and the temporal material scanning. So go after those early on. What do the charge and statics do? Well, it's giving you a bonus when there's various states. You can see that bonus gets quite high. However, the most important one for immediate is going to be getting more loot. I know that sounds common sense, but you never know if something's waiting in the background that might be more valuable. Another one that will become valuable once you reach detective is going to be the PvE temporal barrier. Even though it does not work on entities and armadas, that will help for other hostiles across the game. And I do like that for later on. That's going against, say, silent hostiles, making them easier for players as they progress in their gameplay. Sadly, it does not work against the Krenom, but if you do believe that would be something good, maybe that makes that more valuable, hey, that's feedback that we can provide, and feedback's always good. Then you have the quantum interception, which is decreasing negative FKR rep, which is neat, but not necessarily the most important, but it will help you perfect that tri-faction rep grind. Again, this is something a little bit later on, but it is available at Agent, which is a rank that most players who are participating in this loop will reach by the end of the first month. You also have the temporal propaganda, which is increasing your positive. Now, I do potentially like this, especially because it's going to help you with the mirror rep grinding for those of you who are trying to get as much rep as possible. Again, I talked about when this was coming out. Big premise of this was to make the actual grind of faction easier, so that you're not spending as much time on it, making more time for things like this. But the big one, getting the loot first, and that way you can start working on both of these, because optimally you want to be able to pull both of these chests. Now, thanks to the Armada directives they're paying out, I have been able to do multiple chest pulls. So mainly I'm focusing, as you can see, on these right here, wanting to increase my reputation. And as you get better, you get more rep. But again, having to rank up to do that. It is a very slow burn and slow process. So if you are having difficulty, please know you're not alone. That was the entire premise of me wanting to make sure that y'all are aware of this special code. Not only more directives, but as we said, the building increasing, or giving you the effect of the max building for your ops level, so that you can see this one right here, the damage versus the Krenom, wanting to really take advantage of that. So for me, a level 53 would actually be giving me a bonus of 7,100. That's quite a bit. So when it comes to the faction itself, the main thing you want to try to get after is the loot and being able to do the multiple pulls a day. I would argue that static has the most early value, especially when it comes to trying to upgrade the building. And a couple months down the road, this faction will get easier, but the immediate buy-in is quite difficult with having to keep up with the exocomps, because remember, these are an absolute must-have. So you need to do your claims every day. I would recommend pulling these, even if you just have them sitting. Still want to have them so that you don't hit the max on your requisition form, and pulling the directives every day that you can, so that you can run these, and trying to run them in batches. So one other thing to note when it comes to upgrading this faction, when I say running in batches, you want to save your Cerritos boost, your max fortification, Lorca if you've obtained him so far, so that you can get all those boosts going at one time, and it will make a difference. As far as faction focus, get to the favors first, do the loot first, and then as you progress, you can start working on some of these that may have a little bit more value, but immediately get that loot going. That's got to be the focus. Thankfully, the faction itself is not terribly deep, so we don't have to go into too much of a deep dive. I think a lot of the faction favors are pretty self-explanatory, with the main three early on being these right here, with the temporal material scanning being the most important. If you're getting those static credits, even 20% increases add up. You want to get as much loot as you can from these, because that is the early bottleneck. Hope this video helps you out. If you have questions, as always, my DMs are open. Live long and plunder. Stay safe with our Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next STFC video. And again, apologies for the tardiness to this one rolling out.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.